Okay, so screen share is on. Okay, so here is the Southern Literature unit. This is the unit that's going to contain the research paper. And the first thing I want you to notice is that I put in several pages of instructions as well as helpful suggestions. Just basically things that I have come across um, in the last few years that I've been teaching this paper and problems that students have had. So I want you to make sure that you're looking at the whole modules list. Um, because I put in two extra pages in here, just instructions and helpful tips to make sure that you do it right. So the Southern Literature discussion, the first 3 pages of the content in the Southern Literature discussion are unrelated. And then I put this page in right away because I want you to make sure that you know exactly what the topics are, because the students frequently can't find the topic because for some stupid reason, inside the content of the module, the topics are not really even indicated all that extensively. The topics are there, but there's no title that says these are the topics. It's not in bold, it's just a paragraph in the page. So I always try to highlight that because students miss what those topics are a lot. So here are the topics of research paper. You do not get to choose one of the topics. I'll tell you in a second what you do get to choose. The topics of the research paper are kind of varied. So here they are. You are to choose a Georgia author and one of their works to focus on. You will address the following topics in your essay. So what you get to choose is the author you want. It has to be a Georgia author. No, it doesn't have to be an author that was born here, but they at least needed to live here at some point. Okay? Um, a lot of students choose Flannery O'Connor because she was born and raised here. She lived in Milledgeville. She's a very well-known Georgia author. But I cannot tell you how many research papers I've read on Flannery O'Connor. So I would be really thrilled if you chose someone different. I love her to death. She's amazing. But so many people choose her. If that's really what you would like to do, go for it. She has a lot of great content, a lot of great examples for the essay. But a lot of students will choose other poets. Even Jimmy Carter is considered a Georgia author. So there's a lot of different stuff that you can pick. These are the 4 topics that you need to cover in your research paper, and it's a good thing to know these topics before you begin the research. The writer's biography and the influence of his or her life on the writing. You cannot make your whole paper about that. Some students try to do that and leave out the rest of the topics. Okay. So what in that author's life influenced their writing? For example, a lot of writers experience some level of trauma in their life, and they will include similar situations, or their stories will be deep and dark because they're dealing with this trauma. Um, and that would be something that you would want to point out. Features that make the text specifically Southern. Think about the setting, the characters, the plot, the dialogue, the way that they say things. Where does the story take place? Where the story takes place is not enough to identify it as Southern. Just because something happens in Valdosta, whatever, doesn't mean it's specifically Southern. It could just be, passing through. But you're going to want to focus on the way the characters talk, maybe their religion, their values. If you're choosing an old text or something like that, the fact that they owned slaves may be something that could be considered Southern. Not that that would be a good thing, but that would be something that would say the fact that this family owned slaves. Or in Huckleberry Finn, there is an escaped slave. That is something that would identify it as Southern. Um, Huckleberry Finn is a great example of that. I don't think Huckleberry Finn can be identified as a Georgia text, though, but that was just one of the examples, something that might be of value that was held at that time, whether or not it's a ridiculous value or not. Number 3, how the work was initially received. That is, what did the people think of this author and this text at the time that it was first published? There are some authors that they really don't find success until after they've passed away. Maybe you can find a source that has a review for one of their books from when it was released or something like that. That one can be a little bit difficult to find, but students are still able to find success in this regard. Number 4, how the work is similar or different to other Southern texts in the unit. Now, this is something students do a lot. They'll say, this is similar to other texts in our unit, blah, blah, blah. Don't mention the unit. Do not refer to the unit or the course. Simply choose another text that seems similar and compare and contrast. There is no need to talk about the Georgia Virtual School course. So the point is that if somebody outside of Georgia Virtual School were to read your paper, they don't need to know where you got the content. They don't need to know that it's from the course. They don't need to know that it's from Georgia Virtual School. But there are plenty of other texts in our course that might be similar to something you picked. For example, if you choose something grotesque and dark, there are plenty of stories in our course that are dark. Or maybe a poet and you want to compare them to another poet or something like that. There's a lot of things that you can do. And there's a lot of texts in the course that you can compare to. But if you are struggling, let's say you pick a Georgia author that is extremely unique or whatever, and you can't find something within the course, let me know that you're going to go outside the course and you're going to pick something different. Just let me know in advance, send me an email or a text or whatever, and we'll talk about that. But I would prefer it to be something similar to what's in the course. Just don't mention the course. That irks me. Choose your author and your text carefully. Now, you want to make sure that you have enough to write about. Okay. Choose something you find interesting, but also something that is Southern enough to make it possible for you to identify elements of Southern literature. A short story is probably the best choice for this paper because it will give you enough material to analyze without being too long. Now, let me be specific here. A lot of students might choose a poem. Okay. Keep in mind that you have to identify Southern features in that poem. The fact that there was a creek running through, or there were pretty flowers, or something like that doesn't identify it as Southern. So you do need to be very careful in your choice making, and I cannot stress that enough. You want to choose something that has enough elements for you to actually focus on as Southern without it being too long. You don't want to have to read an entirely new novel. I would recommend choosing a short story that's no more than a certain number of pages. You don't want to choose this crazy long story or a novel or something like that that's just going to make your work all that much more difficult. But if you choose a short story, you're likely to have enough material that could be considered Southern in that text without having to read something crazy long. That's just my 2 cents. Make sure your research properly addresses the variety of required topics. I will be checking for this in your annotated bibliography. So in your annotated bibliography, I'm going to look to make sure that each of your topics are going to be covered within that research and that you're not just going to blow over one of the portions of the topic. Also, please ask questions as soon as possible. If there's something you are unsure about, please ask. I would hate for you to get all the way to the rough draft with a misunderstanding. Unfortunately, that has happened. Students choosing to cover a topic that isn't one of the topics that's there. Leaving one of the topics out, that's another common mistake. Or basically writing a biography when it's supposed to cover all of those things. Okay. Okay. In the research discussion, the research on page 4, and in the research discussion, you're going to be presented with the main topic of what to choose and which Georgia author and which text. And that's what you write about in the research discussion. That's pretty much all you need. I think that it might ask you about what made you interested or whatever. You know how to do discussions. I'm not going to go over that in too much depth. Let's take a look at the note that I put in for the annotated bibliography. Oh, I didn't put a full note. I just put a title in. Remember the research, the annotated bibliography requires 5 research sources. I have some students that try to get away with less than that, and I would highly recommend not going with more than 5 because A, I have to read that. B, that's a lot of extra work on you. And C, this is not a 10, 12 page research paper. It's, you know, some students end up with it being 5, some students end up with it being shorter than that. So you really don't want to overkill it on the research. So your annotated bibliography, let's open this up. Okay, I'm going to look over the rubric here. So like, just kind of give you a heads up of what's going to be expected here. Annotations for 5 sources are present, and all 5 annotations include a summary of the information provided in the source. The summaries are impressively thorough, clear, and well organized. Okay, so what an annotated bibliography is you're going to do your research ahead of time. You're going to find 5 sources that you're going to use in your paper. You want to evaluate them, and you're going to share with me in your annotated bibliography what that source is about, which is that first one, the summary. The second one is the assessment, meaning the reliability of the source. You're not going to want to choose a wiki or a blog or anything like that. It needs to be something that is established as respectable. Okay, that's where you're going to assess the reliability. And the next one is a reflection on how you're going to possibly use that source in your paper. For example, if you you found a critical review of the essay that was published 2 weeks after the book was released, that would be something that would be great, because then that would be like a contemporary review or how it was received. Obviously, a short biography would be necessary in order to kind of cover what the author went through in their life, things like that. So you're in each of your sources, you don't really need to say, you know, I'm going to use this quote specifically or anything like that. You just want to briefly discuss what that source is going to do for you in your essay. And part of that is to make sure that if you are that you have sources that cover each of the 4 parts of the topic. That document does need to be in MLA formatting. The source itself is going to be the actual citation, the header, the spacing, the title, the margins, all of that needs to be in MLA. And then finally, that your sources are actually cited correctly. So 2 of them are pretty easy. Your formatting and your citations, that's going to be something that's going to be easier to do. You get 40% just for doing that right. And then you get 20% for each of the parts of the writing that's supposed to be there. Don't go crazy. Don't write me an entire page per citation, please. You can easily do a few sentences for each parts, 2 or 3, 4 maybe sentences for each of these sections of the topic. Okay, so the annotated bibliography is one of the first things that to do. And I want you to make sure that I want you to make sure that you have my response to that before you continue. I don't want you to continue on to the next part of the assignment, which is the outline, without getting your annotated bibliography approved. And the reason for that is because I catch mistakes in the annotated bibliography in what you're supposed to do and making sure that you're doing things in the right direction. Don't want you to get to the outline and be going in the completely wrong direction. So do wait and let me get each piece done. I try to grade on a daily basis, and I try to get everything graded so that you can make sure that you know that you're heading in the right direction. Okay, so the next assignment that's due is the research paper outline. I do believe it gives you an outline to use in the unit, roughly around page 7, that you need to have filled in. Please be specific with this. I want you to use the outline because when you actually get to writing the rough draft, using the outline will make your rough draft writing very easy. Okay, so if you do your planning well you use that outline well, it's a very detailed outline. If you use that outline well, it'll help you make sure your paper is covering everything it's supposed to cover, as well as making sure it's organized and detailed. It's going to ask you to pull out some quotes from your research. It's going to ask you to explain those quotes. If you follow that outline well, you're going to get, first of all, 100 on that outline, but then you're in a really good place in order to get your rough draft started. Okay, don't blow off the outline. I can tell when students write an essay without proper planning. No, you need to go play. Go play. Don't touch. Go play.
Evelyn. Evelyn.
Sorry, my daughter decided to come visit. Okay, so don't blow off that outline. I can always tell when somebody has gone about their essay without any kind of proper planning. They're just literally all over the place. Okay, so again, make sure that that outline has been approved by me before you move on to your rough draft. And again, make sure your rough draft has been approved by me before you move on to your final draft. That's very, very important. Even if it means that, you have to submit something a day or two late because I haven't gotten it done yet, I will take that off. Okay. I just need you to make sure that you put a note in when you submit that assignment. I was waiting for my annotated bibliography to be graded, so I'm sorry this is late, but here it is. And that's totally okay. I can go back and double check when I graded that annotated bibliography in order to prove that you're telling the truth. Okay, so don't take advantage of that, but do make sure that you have each thing graded before you move on to the next one. And that's why I spread the scheduling out a little bit, so that you can have a day or two for each assignment, a day at least for each assignment. I think I did my best to try to do that, but some people that maybe started on a later start date don't have that. The research process discussion is just asking you to evaluate how you did with that research paper, what it is that you learned about your topic that was interesting, as well as what you learned about the research process that maybe change the way you will write research papers in the future. Some questions that I have received in the past. It does not need to be an argumentative essay. You don't need to choose a topic that was controversial or anything like that. You don't need to do a counter argument paragraph in this essay. You are just going to cover the topic. However, that you still need to argue a point. You still have to have a thesis statement, and you still have to provide evidence of that point. A lot of students will include, they will talk about how that author's upbringing influenced their writing and made them a respected Southern author, something like that. And then you're going to want to defend that with your paper. So it's not really as much of an argument as your literary analysis essays, but you're still going to have a thesis statement that you're going to support with evidence. You mentioned that their upbringing made them who they are and what influenced their writing. We're going to discuss that in one of the paragraphs when you talk about their biography and how it supported how it influenced their writing. Okay. So as I said, make sure that as soon as you have a question that you ask that question. I don't want to find out, on the rough draft that you weren't understanding things. Again, make sure that you get a grade on each piece of the paper before you turn in the next one. Because again, I don't want to find out on the rough draft because you turned in the annotated bibliography, the outline, and the rough draft on the same day. I don't want to find out on the rough draft that you had made a major error and had major misunderstanding, and therefore have to completely redo your paper before the final draft. And unfortunately, that has happened. And I do expect that to happen again this time around because people aren't paying attention. But I try to do what I can to curb issues that I see happening frequently. Okay, so hopefully the little coverage here covered any questions that you might have. Also, maybe it brought up some other questions that you need to have answered. So remember, the best way to get a hold of me is a text message. It's the fastest way. Emails are fine. I can still answer those on my phone. So I'm going to end the screen share. Okay. And then, Avani, do you have any questions? It's going to start at a different time for everybody. A couple people are working ahead and have already started working on it. I can check your pace plan for you. So Avani, you have a few assignments for it starting this tomorrow, actually. So the Southern Literature discussion and the research topic discussion for you start tomorrow. And let me see, what was your start date? You were the 5th. Okay, so somebody that had a start date of the 2nd, which is most of the group, is going to have some of the assignments actually due today. So you'll have this done and completely turned in within, as in up to the rough draft, by Wednesday. Most people that started on the 2nd. So it's within the next few days that this is going to be completed. But like I said, it's 1 or 2 pieces per day. And if you turn in the annotated bibliography, say like at 11:59, and your outline is due the next day, you might need to give me an extra day. But like I said, I will. If you need you need to give me extra time, go ahead and start working on the next unit. So if you're waiting on me to finish looking at your annotated bibliography, like some people have the annotated bibliography and the outline due on the same day, go ahead and start looking at the next unit so that you're not behind. So the next unit is the postmodernism unit. And the Great Gatsby essay is the final draft is due within a few days after that. So there are other things. If you're waiting on me to complete something and you need to wait on submitting research paper assignments, go ahead and start moving on to the next unit, get work done, and then come back to it. Yes. So basically the paper is going to overall cover the author itself with the example of one of their works. You don't want to choose a bunch of their different works. Poems are fine, but I really do highly recommend doing a short story because it's going to give you enough material to write about without being too long. I've seen some students try very hard to write a full research paper on a poem, and they just have a hard time pulling up enough. And some of their evidence and their points are really, really weak because they're having a hard time pulling out enough information from that poem. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, that's fine. Just send me a text anytime you have a question. But I do appreciate you for coming so I can actually talk to a person instead of an empty room. So I'm going to go ahead and get this posted so that those that are starting working on the research paper can take a look at it. Appreciate it. Have a good week.